Hello and welcome to Breaking the Mold, a podcast from Action Funder. Action Funder works with innovative businesses and inspiring non-profit leaders. We enable the two to work together to create measurable change. In this podcast, we're going to introduce you to some of the change makers we know and admire. Get ready to hear about inspiring campaigns, stories of impact, challenges and advice from people dedicated to taking action on issues that matter. I'm Sophie, your host, and today I'm joined by Louisa Ziane, co-founder and chief operating officer of Toast Brewing. Toast isn't your average brewery. When you drink a lager from Toast, you're not just enjoying a great beer, you're taking part in the fight against food waste. Louisa and her team have put sustainability at the core of the business. They use surplus bread to brew beers and give 100% of their profits to environmental charities. Toast is proof that you can grow up a successful business whilst leaving a positive impact on communities and the planet. Let's get started. Louisa, thanks so much for joining us on Breaking the Mold.
Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
No problem at all. You're one of our hero organisations and hero businesses, so I'm really excited to kind of deep dive into some of the drivers for Toast and some of the history as well, because it's such an interesting business model. We talk a lot about innovative business at Action Funder, and I think that Toast really is one of the pinnacles of that. So before we get stuck in, would you give us a little intro to yourself and your background? How did you get to where you are?
Yeah, sure. I co-founded Toast in 2015 and we launched the business in 2016. My life prior to that was pretty varied. I studied law at university, then I trained as an accountant working in financial services. And I kind of realized that it just wasn't really where my heart was. So I studied for a master's with the Open University in environmental decision making. Inspired by traveling that I had done through South America, and then kind of moved my career into sustainability, working with the Carbon Trust as a consultant, looking at carbon footprinting for large companies, their climate policies. And it was after my son was born that I decided that the consulting life wasn't quite for me either, and took a little break where I was freelancing, doing various things, including working for the charity Feedback. They campaign for systemic changes to the food system. At the time, they were very focused on food waste, and now their scope of work is much broader. It kind of really ignited something in me, this idea that the food system is so damaging to the planet, and our modern food system is not really designed to feed people. It's really designed as a business model and how to take profit out of the system, and therefore it's not serving that purpose, and it's causing a huge amount of environmental degradation at the same time, and yet we waste a third of all the food that we produce. So all of that damage that's being done unnecessarily, we're trashing the planet for food that we never eat. It just seemed like, well, crazy and like angering, but also that there was this really neat solution to the climate crisis, to nature and biodiversity crisis that we're facing, that felt simple, cost-effective, really just as well. How do we stop wasting food? And the co-founder of that charity, Tristram Stewart, who's campaigned all of his life for changes to the food system, had met a brewer in Brussels who had worked with their local bakery, used some of their surplus bread to create a beer. That's the Brussels Beer Project. He met with them, talked about the idea for that beer, which was inspired by the origins of brewing, whereby we would allow the grains to ferment using wild yeasts and create the very earliest beers, which were kind of like an alcoholic porridge. It was like going back to humanity's way of ensuring that every single grain was used, had a purpose. Nothing went to waste.
Yeah. no waste at all then.
Yeah, exactly.
It's quite a journey you've been on personally to then come into this space and be driving such, like you said, systemic change with a product. Um, and really interesting to hear the potted history as well. So for Toast, what came first? Was it the will to create a brewery? Was it about food waste, which you've mentioned already? Was it a business for good? What kind of drives the business?
Yeah, very much the mission is to tackle food waste. That's written into our articles of association, and it drives everything that we do. So we have a big, hairy, audacious goal to upcycle 1 billion slices of surplus bread, and that is our motivator for everything that we do.
And where are you now on that journey of to 1 billion?
Well, we have upcycled nearly 4 million slices.
Wow,
so
okay.
it's still a small amount, but our business model is designed so that we look at not being dependent on our own company to hit that goal. But how do we change, or how do we engage the whole industry, the whole brewing industry, to do that? And so we are looking at a slightly different business model that essentially we become an ingredient supplier to other breweries. We've tried to encourage others to use surplus bread. We've done like about 90 different collaborations all over the world, and part of that is because we don't export our beer for environmental reasons. It's much better that we work with a brewer that already exists somewhere like California, say. We use surplus bread in California. We work with a charity there. We use a brewer there and produce the beer there. So that whole collaboration model was designed both to enable us to reach a bigger audience with a limited footprint, but also to inspire other breweries. And I think we've experienced like a real interest from brewers, but they've had challenges because it's not easy to source food safe surplus bread. We have responsibilities around allergens, for example. That bread then has to be processed, dried, crumbed so that it's efficient in the brewing process, and then it's used in a different way in the brew house. And that's okay for a one-off collaboration, exciting beer, but not to build into your business model. So we're looking at how we overcome that, and that's just an example of how our BHAG has guided us. And I guess like we've come, so my background, as we talked about, in sustainability. Tristram as a campaigner, our other co-founder, Rob Wilson, led a social change organization called Ashoka. So we've all come as purpose-led entrepreneurs. Very focused on that mission.
It's a very inspiring mission, I think, for any other businesses out there. I'm going to take us a step back slightly because you started to touch on this earlier. So you're using bread to make beer.
Yes.
Why bread?
Well, essentially bread is a grain that has been cooked. What brewers would traditionally use would be barley that's malted. So it's, a similar process. The malting process is designed to crack open the grain so that we can access the sugars within. We're doing exactly the same thing essentially with bread, being able to access the sugars from the bread as an ingredient. And as I say, we've looked at the history of brewing and the methods that we used, essentially the technique of fermentation to preserve the grain and to create a delicious product that people can enjoy. So it is directly replaceable for a grain. It's not that we're adding in an unusual ingredient to create a new taste. And that's really important because the circular economy model is not just about waste management. It's about how you reduce the extraction of nature's ingredients. So by using surplus bread, we use about 25% bread and 75% barley because we still need some of the flavors and the enzymes from the malt. But we're able to reduce the barley that we use, which has a large land footprint. It has a large energy, water, carbon footprint as well. So yeah, that circular model, I think, it's really is about looking at what the inputs are to your business, or to your products or services, and how you rethink those inputs and reduce the extraction, and actually using surplus, whether that is in your own production processes or from another industry, is a really good way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about as the ins and the outs, right? So thinking about, like you said, what is the impact of the extraction of your ingredients? Really interesting. I can vouch for it being very tasty beer.
Yeah, exactly. And there's
It
so
does
much
work.
bread available. It's
Yeah.
second most wasted food in the UK after potatoes.
I was going to say, is it potatoes or bag salad?
Yeah.
They're the two big ones, aren't they?
Yeah.
So you mentioned about having those supplies and finding that supply of bread. Where does the bread come from in your circular economy for the beer?
Yeah, so at the moment we're working with one bakery in the south coast of England. We have worked with a number of big bakeries as well, and the sandwich industry. When we started off, we were working with small bakeries all around London, taking the end of day loaves, but it's just not very efficient in that way. And because as we matured, we realized we needed a lot of documentation to understand the ingredients that we would have to declare and pack, the allergens, and just have that traceability through the supply chains.
Yeah, so as you're scaling, you need to have that traceability all the way back to source, I guess, especially when you're talking to collaborating with other organizations and globally now as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to your original description of Toast and where it came from, and the passion of you guys as founders, we know from doing our research into you and working with you, you've got a statement on your websites that says you're legally committed to donating all your profits to charities, not shareholders. Are you the Patagonia of the beer world? Is that what you're trying to achieve?
I'm not sure that's Patagonia's model, is it?
Not quite.
I think
No.
essentially,
but they've got their 1%.
Yeah. So I guess this goes back to the motivations behind setting up the business. It wasn't for us to build a business that we could exit from and make a whole load of money. And it was really important to us that we were led by our mission, and that stakeholders that were involved in the business were sharing that ethos as well.
Yeah.
So we committed very early to share all of our profits, or our distributable profits, with charities. I guess also it came out of that relationship with feedback in the early days, understanding that for many charities, there are funding pots available, but often it's quite hard to raise funds that cover your fixed costs. And so if you have a partner that can channel the profits into supporting the charity organization, and that synergy can become really impactful for the charity.
Yeah,
that was the initial idea behind it. Obviously, as a startup, we were not making profits, so we also made a commitment that we would ensure the equivalent of 1% of our revenue went to charities or charitable causes. So that is kind of where we have spent the last few years looking at various different charities as our business has evolved, but always within the food and nature space. And then for our investors, we've done 2 equity raises, and we've got some amazing investors involved that really believe in the mission behind our business. They have also signed a pledge that we created called Equity for Good, and that asks the investors to reinvest any capital gains that they make into other businesses with an environmental mission. And the idea behind that is that we don't want to, through creating value by doing good in our business, we don't want that value to then go to fund something that is at odds with our mission. So we would want, somebody to take a capital gain and then invest it in fossil fuel extraction, for example. So that idea was about, like, how do we contribute to other businesses that are also trying to change the economic system.
So really, it's a really end-to-end ethos, as you said,
Yeah.
a kind of a way of doing business, right from the investment all the way through the distribution and production process, all the way through to the distribution of your profits to charity. There's lots of different types of business model. We touched on it a little bit, the Patagonia model, the 1%. There's very generic ones like B2B, B2C, all those kind of things. How would you define your business model? Have you got something catchy?
Well, I mean, we're a social enterprise, but that term is quite often misunderstood. So it's a business that generates profits. It's just the way that those profits are used that is different. So legally, you as a social enterprise, you're required to invest more than 50% of your profits in charities, and yeah, like we work with organisations like Social Enterprise UK because we believe that businesses can and should be a force for good. And when you have investors, I guess, that incentivize quarterly profit returns, and they're not looking at the bigger impact, not just of the long-term financial stability of your company, but of the impact that you have on your communities. It's not good for anybody. So I guess like as a short, snappy way, we're a social enterprise. We're also a B Corp. We're a business designed to do good.
Yeah. And that equity for good investment model's particularly interesting. And I'm sure something people will be interested in outside as well.
Yeah, we've shared some information with it when we first launched it back in 2018. And we've had a couple of people that have spoken to us as part of their business model to look at whether they could adopt that. It's challenging. It's hard to find investment at any time. It's even harder to find investors that are really aligned with your business and are wanting to make that commitment. But when you find those people, then they become such assets, those people and those companies, such assets to your business and your purpose.
Yeah, and I'm sure real advocates for it as well. And that's absolutely. That spider web effect where you hope that ripple effect, where you'd hope that it kind of catches on and gets communicated out further and used in other businesses as well.
Yeah, that would be great.
Bringing it back to kind of the day to day, you've mentioned already you've been on quite a big growth trajectory. How do you balance the need to remain commercially successful? You are a business, as you've said, as well as your commitment to environmental and social impact. How does that work in your operations? You've touched on some of it before, but essentially you need to sell beer, right?
Yeah. Yes. But I think that can be one and the same. So we have seen, I guess, over the past 4 years, like consumers, so people that are purchasing and drinking our beer, have become much more environmentally aware. More people indicating that when they're making purchasing decisions, they're thinking about sustainability. We see evidence in that in the purchasing, but there are people who definitely consider it, and certainly on the other side, if you're terrible for the environment, there will be people that can choose to not purchase from you. I think it's even more so when we look at B2B. So we supply supermarkets like Waitrose, Co-op Ocado, but also lots of corporates who are, they have their own targets around either food waste or their carbon footprint, looking at net zero targets. And so they're looking at their supply chain and wanting to ensure that the companies that they're purchasing for are able to help them essentially deliver to whether it's their scope 3 emissions or their wider environmental strategy. So it then becomes this partnership. And I think actually for Toast, because we are so authentic in our approach, and it isn't, we've created a brewery, and now as an afterthought we're thinking about how to make it more sustainable. Everything that we've done as a business has considered the impact. Then we've become kind of a really attractive partner for some of those businesses, and some relationships and contracts that we have that I think we wouldn't have had if we
Yeah.
hadn't had people and planet, as a
Mm.
same at the same consideration. But yeah, there is a balance to be struck, of course. Yeah.
It's been 8 years, you meant, because you started 2016.
Yeah.
And we've touched on scale. So can businesses that have put good at their core, the same way that you have with all of your collaborations and really as the DNA of your brand, scale in the usual way? Is that a challenge? Does that work for you? And how do you see that kind of mapping out in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why not. We're a private limited company, so our business legal status is the same as any other company. We're a craft brewery, so we are we have the same opportunities but challenges that everybody
Mhm.
else in our industry faces. From rising energy costs to shortages of ingredients like barley. But there's no reason why we wouldn't scale it any differently. I
Mhm.
guess the main difference for us is the use of surplus bread and how we scale that, which is what we're working on with our
Yeah.
ingredients business at the moment. How we get to a kind of reliable source of surplus breads that we can store
Mm.
and have available for use. Um, but yeah, again, lots of the challenges that we're facing are the same as any other business.
Mhm.
We actually, one of our investors that came on board in 2022 was Heineken. They have put in a small investment and are working with us on the ingredients side because they're looking at their net zero targets and their environmental
Mm.
commitments and see the
Mhm.
circular economy as a key part of that. So we're interested in learning from us and kind of working with us on an R&D basis to see how we could scale to, essentially one of the biggest breweries in the world.
Yeah. Huge
So
opportunity.
yeah, no limits.
Mm.
And that was, our original idea, that the food waste is such a huge problem. Bread
Mm.
waste, in the UK, the stats we've seen is kind of between 40 and 50% of bread
Mm.
is wasted. In the US, it's similar, kind of 35-40%. It's a big problem all over the world, so we need a
Mm.
scalable solution to
Mhm.
tackle that.
Yeah, and you might as well have a really great tasting beer at the end of it as
Yep.
well. As a result of
Good.
it, might as well do good in all kinds of ways. A lot of people might know you as Toast Ale. So thinking about that journey you've been on, you started off with just with ale products and you've expanded into lagers now as well. And you mentioned California earlier in the conversation. What's the next? Is ingredients R&D kind of the next bit for you? What does the next kind of 5 years look like?
When we launched, maybe it's an insight into how little we understood beer that we chose to have Toast Ale that immediately limited us. Your beer category is essentially ales and lagers. So we had a pale ale for the first year and then expanded to include a lager and another ale. So we've had the lager for a really long time.
Mhm.
And the name has just been a little bit confusing. So we did a rebrand last year to better tell the why story of toast. So bringing
Mhm.
in some of the nature telling aspects in that,
Yeah.
our food is nature. And if we love nature and appreciate nature, then we will also understand our food and not waste that. So we did
Mhm.
that and changed the name at the same time to recognize that.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, as you say, we have had a few franchises and subsidiaries over the models that we've tested over the years, and just it's been quite difficult to manage from the UK. So we scaled some of those back and have focused on collaborations.
Mhm.
The next stage is this ingredients business. The name of it is Companion. So it is Toast Companion from the
Mhm.
Latin word compan, somebody with whom you share bread, you break
Yeah.
bread. And the next few years are really going to be focused on how we help others essentially to tackle this huge problem of bread waste.
Yeah, we'll come on to collaboration in a second because it's clearly a really integral part of your business and how you can make the most impact with what you're doing. What unique advantages do you think social enterprises like yours have over a traditional business when it comes to driving positive and environmental change, but also just generally in terms of the business model as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess for me, it's how business should be. It's not necessarily about looking at what are the advantages and disadvantages. Like, it's a responsibility. Like, companies should have to consider all stakeholders as part of the way we operate. We are responsible for the impact that we have on nature, the impact that we have on people as well. And I think the business model should be designed as to ensure that we can justify the purpose of corporations existing. So yeah, I guess that's my first thought. But then I think we've talked about the demand from a customer client perspective where people are looking to their supply chain to be different. We've talked a little bit about investors. So there are investors that are looking to have portfolios where they feel that the way that their money is invested is also doing good. But there are, other stakeholders, for example, employees. When we hire people, is quite often one of the motivating factors for people for applying for a role and then coming along to interviews, because it's not just that people are wanting to be treated well and feeling that as a social enterprise that's built into the business model, this care of employees, but also wanting to feel that the business they're working with shares their beliefs, their ethics, and we spend so much of our working lives of our lives working, right? And
sadly.
But it doesn't have to be. Like, if we are working in something that we really believe in, that we get a lot of personal satisfaction out of, then our working lives are improved, and all of our entirety of our lives are improved. So I think more and more so people are looking to employers to be more responsible. So of course that helps with hiring. It helps us find really brilliant people who we talked about advocates, and your best advocates are your people in your team, right? If we can bring people in that just absolutely love what we're doing, the passion that they go out into the world with is so much different than I think if we were just any other brewery. So that, I think, for me, is one of the really important aspects of social enterprise.
Yeah, it's a really good answer. And I think, again, it kind of shows how the purpose and the mission kind of permeates through a social enterprise, through the business, from investors to employees and all the kind of bits in between. And we've touched a few times on collaborations and partnerships because you said it's intrinsic to the way you work, as you have to operate as a business and as a social enterprise. What's your kind of overall approach to making an impact with partnerships? So just for full disclosure on the podcast, Toast are running a fund with Action Funder at the moment, so we know you're supporting local groups. But what do you do outside of that, and how does it work for you?
Yeah, every aspect of our business is reliant on partners. We contract brew, so we don't own our own brewery. Well, actually, we do own a small brewery now, because we've just opened a microbrewery in Milton Keynes. Although, again, that is a partnership. That's part of a partnership with Compass Group, who are looking after the catering for Unity Place, which is a new development in Milton Keynes. But most of our beer is brewed under contract. At the moment, we work with Curious Brewery in Kent, and we have a brewer in house, so he looks after the recipe, quality control. That is a two-way relationship to make sure that we get the product that we want, and I guess they get the business from us as well. And it's really important, I think, to find the right partnerships. So we had a lot of conversations at the beginning. Yes, all of the commercials were discussed, but also talking to them about their ambitions. What are they looking to do around, renewable energy, for example, because breweries are really energy intensive. So making sure that even if they're not there now with everything, their ambitions are aligned with ours. So that the brewery partner was a really big one for us. And then we collaborate with not just other breweries, but a lot of other food brands. We did a really lovely series of beers in 2021 with 6 different B Corps, taking their ingredients and using them in beer to tell a story. That was about how do we teach people about the journey that our food goes on and the impact that it has on the environment without it being preachy. So we chose 6 different beers that touched on like beautiful parts of our planet, from the forests, the rivers, the oceans, our soils, like how important the soils are for nourishing us from the food that they produce. For example, Divine Chocolate, working with them on a cocoa, a chocolate stout that told the story of forests and I really love those where there's that. They're both a B Corp and a social enterprise. So Cafe Direct was another one as well that we worked with. But really, that's really rewarding. And then, I guess the other partnerships that you mentioned was through the impact side of our business. And it may be directly with a charity. So we're currently about to launch a campaign with Plant Life to support their work. Kind of protecting UK native flora, and fungi, and kind of using the funds from our model to support charitable work, but also advocacy groups. So, for example, we have supported the Climate and Nature Bill, as it's now called, using our voice, the platform that we have to raise awareness of some of the issues and point people to in a direction where we can each have a bigger impact than just thinking of ourselves as consumers. Like, how do we actually engage more as citizens? Talking to our MPs about the Climate and Nature Bill, for example, kind of using that power that we do each hold as citizens. So how do we do that? I think that for me, like, we could do campaigns ourselves as Toast, but we're not the experts in in policy change. We I guess we have a convening power, but we also have that constraint of needing to also focus on the commercial side of the business. So I think for me it's better that organizations like Zero Hour, they convene supporters like Toast, like many other businesses, different organizations, and we support them where we're able to do that. We've done a similar one with Feedback as well, our original charity partner, to try to get food waste reporting to be mandatory. It was a consultation that was promised for many, many years, delayed through COVID, put out last year, large businesses mainly in favour of it, and then the government kept it as voluntary. So we funded legal work with Feedback to ask the government to tell us why or how they've made that decision. And then Steve Barclay, when he came into the role at DEFRA, had committed to relook at it this year. There was another letter that went with another group, a consortium of businesses led by Too Good to Go, and kind of a letter was written, and the response so far is that later this year, our voice as an SME, we have people that will listen and be like, oh yeah, that's great, but if we're a part of a much bigger group, our voice becomes so much more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry. The lighting has gone off in here.
Just for full disclosure to the audience, Louisa's lighting's gone
There we
off,
go. There we go.
but I can still hear you.
Okay.
There we go. She's back in the room. You obviously haven't stood up
Yes, I
recently.
haven't moved in.
So I was going to ask about what a partnership which has allowed you to amplify your social voice and your business. And that sounds like the exact example, really, of one that really stands out in that you're influencing with other partners that policy change all the way through the chain, all the way up to making a real difference within the way we operate as a society, really. Would that be the one that really stands out for you in terms of your partnerships, or is there a smaller one, more local to home?
Yeah, I mean, I love the campaign that we are just closing with Action Funder. This one was very much about reaching out to grassroots community groups and supporting people that were looking at how to make local food systems more resilient, looking at growing within community gardens or introducing composting systems to tackle food waste and create compost. And so, yeah, we've got 5 different organizations and that are all for fairly small sums of money, are all doing really incredible things that will impact the local community directly. People will be able to visit these spaces to see what is happening. It will have an environmental impact, and also like a lot of them have a well-being aspect as well, because it's about giving people these green spaces to go to and kind of engage with nature directly. And I'm really looking forward to going out and visiting each of those sites and seeing those projects come together and telling their stories as well, using our platform to tell that story of this innate desire that we all have to be reconnected with food. We connect 3 times a day with the food that reconnected with nature, and we reconnect 3 times a day with the food that we eat. And so we just tend to have lost that part of the journey, and which is why so much food is wasting. You're at one part of the value chain where you're maybe preparing the food, but eating the food. We just don't see where it's all come from. And I'm a gardener, and so, from planting the seed to pricking out and nurturing those seedlings, planting them out, the the nature involved, but also the human love and attention that goes into producing the food. And it's really rewarding when you have food at the end of it.
And the whole bit, the pre-plate bit, let's call it that, the bit before it gets to your plate is really, really important. And I think if those stories will come out of those groups, you've got 5 groups which are really fantastic. And as you say, a small amount of money for those groups, but actually they will do absolute wonders with it. So it'll be fantastic to see those stories come through. That's fantastic. Thanks, Louisa. Thank you for your time today. Before we wrap up, we ask all of our guests to leave us with one takeaway. We're all about action at Action Funder, as you know, and with all your incredible innovative business thinking in mind that we've covered off today, what's the one action that businesses can take today to start creating positive impact?
Oh, that's a great question. I think we've touched a little bit on various stakeholders, but in particular employees, and how important how important your business and your alignment of ethics is with your employees, but also how powerful people can be. So I would say engaging with your employees, understanding from them what they want from your company, but also the ideas that people have. How can we harness the passions that people have, but also, kind of what are people's worry points at the moment? What do people feel is needed from business? And we can harness all that desire and get behind that kind of as a collective, I guess, a collective of people in a business to take action. And that will be very different for different companies. But it's a really lovely way to bring your team together to create real impact and to make sure that your work is enjoyable to everybody involved.
Yeah, so kind of making sure that you're bringing them on that impact journey with you and getting them involved, getting employees involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So
in the process.
and we're a B Corp as well. We're just going through the recertification process. Actually, the B impact assessment is like a really nice tool to look across your entire business. So maybe that's a quick win for companies that are not B Corps to complete that. You can probably do that very quickly in about an hour and a half. That will give ideas of things that you can do. It's a bit more involved if you want to go down and the certification route, but to get an initial idea, there are lots of resources shared by B Lab, the charity that runs B Corp, but also B Corps themselves. So if you're needing inspiration of how to engage people, what kind of campaigns have been run, employee engagement campaigns, there's lots in the B Corp community as well to help with that.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for your time, Louisa. It's been great talking to you today, and thanks for breaking the mold with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Great to chat.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Breaking the Mold. Join us next month when we feature another brilliant voice from the world of positive impact. You can subscribe to Action Funder on your podcast player to be notified when that episode drops. In the meantime, visit actionfunder.org to find more inspiring leaders driving change in our community. Whilst you're there, make the most of the tools to find grassroots non-profits and learn how you can make an impact on people, planet and profit. Finally, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate our show. This will help more people discover the show and get inspired.